We will call this special meeting of the Board of Methacton School Directors to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, there was an executive session that was held on February 26, 2014, for the purposes of discussing three items. Number one, the conditional use application before Worcester Township. Number two, an update on MESPA, Teamsters, and MEA agreements. And number three, an open records appeal from Janice Kearney. By way of attendance, all board members are present except Mrs. Shackelford, who has a prior obligation. So we'll move on to item number 5, public comment on board action items. Is there any public comment?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. First off, one of the items on this evening's agenda is a discussion on the fields. And I made up a score sheet on that for several of the plans that are under discussion, and I'd like to pass that out to board members and the administration. Like that.
Thank you.
I don't know to what extent you're going to vote on plans, but Mrs. Petrauskas has been urging at least a discussion on plans or the scope of plans. And I think that in that document I tried to encapsulate various options where I have Plan A as a 2-year phased project, and Plan B, the project to cram everything into 2014. I know there's a vote this evening on bonding, and with regard to that vote, I think it should be switched on the agenda with the discussions about the field project. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on board action items? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move into item number 6, items for board action. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item 6.1, field trip, state championships. I'm asking that the board approve retroactively a trip for the boys track and field team to Penn State University on February 28th, 2014, and March 1st, 2014.
Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Roth, second. Kathleen, discussion?
Just have a question. Was there any cost to the district on this? I wouldn't imagine.
Typically, there is regarding the transportation and time away, but it's not. It's provided as a retroactive item because we weren't able to provide the item in advance of the championship requirements being and the students being made eligible for the project.
How did they do?
Mr. Spivak?
They did well, and it is it's part of the athletic budget by athletics for championships. So that was fun.
Oh, okay.
Great. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Passes 8-0.
The second item for board action this evening is resolution number 04-03, General Obligation Bond Series 2014. This evening we have Zach Williard and John Cox presenting the information and answering any questions that board members may have regarding this resolution.
Okay, great. Thank you. So before you tonight is this resolution. I'm going to give you a brief overview. I know you've heard this a few times now. I'm not going to bore you with going through all the details again. And then John's going to discuss the resolution. But this blue handout that's in front of everyone, it's very similar to what you've been shown over the last few months. So again, tonight, the series of 2014 Emmaus new money bond issue in the amount of $5.5 million. And just to take a step back to just remember, this is all part of a multi-year plan. Last year, we refinanced and restructured 6 different bond issues, lowered your debt service overall to a run rate of about $9.35 million. With the anticipation that this may be coming down the road, now that we're here, we are squeezing this in order to keep your overall debt service under $9.5 million, kind of sticking to the plan from last year. So just as a refresher, this is part of kind of a 2-step process that we've been working on since early last year. So page 1 is the same bullet point page you've been seeing. Currently the all-in rate of this Emmaus bond issue is less than 1.5%, so very healthy interest rate, very low interest rate that should help the district save some money. Page 2, the same chart we like to show you each time we're here, the fixed rate bonds versus variable rate bonds, and as you can see, there's a very large spread to that right now. Variable rates, again, have been very attractive for the last few years, and historically, you can see that variable rates have outperformed the fixed rates from time to time. Page 3, this would be the final Emmaus loan should you approve it tonight. In column 1, you can see in the final maturity, this would be 2027. Your principal amounts in column 2 of $5.5 million and an estimated rate of right now about 1.35%. In column 8, you do see you're going to project or budget this at a 2.5%, so we can be sure to account for any rate fluctuations that there may be in the future. But again, even an all-in rate of 2.5% is still very healthy. And then finally, in column 10, you'll see your total local effort. So that's your gross debt service net of state aid. And you can see the run rate of just less than $9.5 million through the final maturity of the school district's debt. So again, keeping with the spirit of the plan from last year to get all this debt under that $9.5 million. Page 4, the sources and uses. Note in the middle of the page, the settlement date will change. As you know, the construction bids, we're going to redo that. The settlement date will change once we get bids in and approve them. We'll be about 2 weeks away from actually having the money for the district. So tonight you're going to approve all the paperwork, essentially, so we can file with DCED, and then as we get the bids in, then we can move forward with settlement. Page 5, the same bullet point page, just on the Emmaus notes that you've seen over the last few issues. Page 6 is something that we always like to show you when we're here. The top half of this is your gross debt service for your individual bond issues, and over on the right you can see your existing Emmaus bond pool issues. The bottom half is what we call the local effort, so that's net of a state aid. Again, on the far right you can see all your variable rate debt as well, and then in the far right column you can see again the run rate that we're trying to get this in under $9.5 million. And then finally on page 7, just an updated timeline, but it essentially is just showing you and telling you what I just said, that once we do receive the construction bids and get those approved, we'll kind of be a few weeks away from settling and having the money in the bank account. So I know that was the real quick version. Again, I said I didn't want to bore you with going through the whole thing again. I'm happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll turn it over to bond counsel.
Any questions?
Okay, great.
Could you just walk me through, and I'm not sure what column it is, the one that most approximates the annual expenditures
Yes, which page?
for this particular loan? Whatever page makes sense.
So page 3.
Okay.
So page 3, again, in column 2, you see your annual principal payments. In column 3 is the estimated interest rate going forward in the future. So in column 4, you have your estimated annual fiscal year interest. And then in column 5, you have your estimated annual debt service, which is your principal plus your interest.
Okay.
And this was issued as a wraparound structure, so it has the lowest overall upfront millage impact or impact to the budget. But again, in combination with the restructuring and refinancing that we did last year as a two-part process, this fits into your overall debt with that wraparound structure, so that your overall level payments at the end of the day, after all the dust settles on this and all your other bond issues, is below that $9.5 million threshold.
And to be clear, it's backloaded. I'd say, I can't give you an exact number without a calculator, but 80% of the payments, I'll say roughly, are made in the last 3 years
Right.
of this contract.
Yeah, as part of the wraparound structure, to have the lowest upfront impact and to fit into your existing debt portfolio, the payments are mostly between 2025 and 2027. That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Brenda?
Yes, you have the interest rate at 1.35 for this entire period. But when you look at the chart, you see the variable rate typically is a good bit higher than that. 1.35 sounds like it's very optimistic for this length of time.
Well, currently on your existing MAS loans, I think you're paying just about that rate right now. Going into the future, the reason we like to budget a higher rate than what the actual rate is to account for those rate fluctuations. So right now, if the rate is about 1.35%, and we keep in the budget a higher interest rate than that, it covers any fluctuations in rates that you see throughout the year. Then at the end of the budgetary period, if we're under budget, then that money goes into a rate stabilization fund, which again is shown on page 3, if you flip back to that. So in this example, in year 1, the actual rate's a 1.35. The district's going to budget a 2.5%. So you're going to come in, approximately, 85 basis points under what the budgeted rate was. And then in column 11, there's going to be a deposit to this debt service rate stabilization improvement fund, that's going to earn interest as well. And that's kind of how the process typically has worked with your existing MAS, loans, as well as how we'd like this one to go.
You're using 2.5% though for that period of time.
Right.
And is that that looks like it's low compared to what the typical variable rate has been? Yeah,
well, you're certainly welcome to budget whatever the district would like. We don't necessarily want you to budget 6%. When we really know the interest rate right now is a 1.35%, just because, there'd be, budgets are tight and, there'd be a lot of fluff in that. But you're certainly welcome to increase the budgeted rate to a 3% or however, we see best fit.
You're just using 2.5 for modeling purposes.
Yeah, this is just an example.
And it's up to us operationally to figure out what we want to do year
Right.
from year. Okay. Other questions?
Some of the literature I've read said that some of these loans have a unlimited tax pledge appended to it. Does this one have that pledge?
Yes, all of the district's debt is issued as general obligation bonds, which has the full faith and credit and taxing power of the district backing them. That's correct. Any other questions? Okay, thank
Great,
you.
Thank you. Bond counsel.
Good evening. John Cox from Roads and Sign in here this evening. On your behalf is your bond counsel. First, I'll note for the minutes and for the record that the resolution before the board this evening has been advertised as required by the Local Government Unit Debt Act, reviewed by your solicitor, and made available for public inspection and for the board's review in advance of this evening's meeting. The resolution conforms with the requirements of the Local Government Unit Debt Act for the school district to issue a general obligation note in this case, which will be purchased by the issuer, in this case, the Emmaus General Authority, the bond pool, the Emmaus Bond Pool Program. The GO note series of 2014 is authorized in the principal amount of $5,500,000. And I won't go through all of the resolution. But as I said, it accepts a purchase proposal from the Emmaus General Authority for the purchase of the school district's general obligation note, authorizes the officers to take all necessary action in order to close the loan, authorizes all of the proceedings to be filed with the Department of Community and Economic Development, and as I understand it, really to keep the momentum going and the school district on schedule with the program. That's why we are presenting the resolution for approval this evening. It is approximately a 30-day process with DCED. This will allow us to keep things moving, and there won't be any further action required by the board in connection with authorizing the debt. So once the bids are received and the project squared away, the district will be in a position to move full speed ahead once the bids are resolved. Be happy to answer any questions that any of the board members may have on the resolution this evening, the proceedings process, what you're approving. But it was all summarized nicely by Mr. Williard. Yes, sir.
One quick question, just to be clear. There's no prepayment penalty in this package?
Correct. There's just a 45-day notice requirement that has to be given to the trustee, the bond pool, in order to prepay principal. But there's no prepayment premium like there would be on like a fixed-rate bank loan.
Other questions for bond counsel? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, in that case, I will ask for a motion to approve resolution number 04-03 as presented by bond counsel authorizing the issuance of Methacton School District's general obligation note series of 2014 in the principal amount of $5.5 million for the purpose of funding various capital projects, including improvements to the school district's athletic facilities, all as further described in the resolution. Is there a motion? Ms. Petraskis, second. Mr. Roth, discussion? Brenda?
I have a question. We authorized something on this at a previous meeting, and this is different than what we previously authorized?
I can speak to that. The resolution we had for previously was the preliminary authorization to proceed to prepare all the paperwork for the board to approve the issuance of the note under the Debt Act for us to place the advertisement in the newspaper for the finance team to work with the main pool compared to the rest of the project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Passes 7-1. Thank you. Okay, dissenting vote was Mark. Mark O'Neill, sorry. Okay, those are all items for board action. Next, we'll move into number 7, items for discussion. Dr. Zerbe?
I'd ask the board members to take seats in the front row. We have two presentations, one on field project plan and a fundraising consultant update. First on the agenda this evening is the Methacton High School campus field project. As mentioned at the February 26th meeting, this special meeting primarily was designed to take action with regards to the issuing of the bond, and two, to allow the board an opportunity to discuss the field project in whatever length they so desire, in order for them to have the ability to get questions answered that they may have, so that they can prepare for the bid process due to arrive on March 25th at our regular scheduled board meeting. For this evening, we're talking about discussions and decisions. Myself and David Horn, our architect, will be talking about several things, but primarily there were three things that I'd like for our discussion to have this evening. I'll spend just a very brief time about an overview of where we've been and how we've gotten here and where we are today. We'll talk about the opportunity for the board to discuss Plan K as a plan that's been used to submit for approvals and permitting and discussion for not only land development for the lights with the township of Worcester, Pennsylvania. And lastly, we have essentially talking about decisions. We have three critical decisions that are really before the board with regards to the overall field project as I see them and as our architect sees them, and certainly that is open for discussion here this evening. So before we go on too far, I just want to remind everyone that in general, it's my understanding, not being here from the inception of the project back several years, again, there's really three main reasons for us being here this evening to talk about the campus-wide field project at Methacton High School. We're talking about issues related to safety, to playability, and to accessibility. Generally, we've had these conversations in the past. I won't draw too much on these, but essentially we're talking about our fields being able to be provided in a safe manner for not only our students, but the away teams that compete on those playing areas. In addition, playability, having the proper scope and sizing for the fields for proper playability under PIAA regulations. And lastly, we had in numerous occasions discussion about the shortage of playing surfaces as a result of the need, and that goes back to our study that was designed to determine that we were basically 11 fields short with a weighted calculation of 9 fields short. By putting in 2 athletic turf fields with lights would allow us to gain 4 additional fields or 4 additional practice/play times, essentially increasing our ability to allow students to practice and to play on the Methacton High School campus. So historical events, one slide, real quick recap. Certainly there's more dates, but Core Concept K was presented and determined to be the most favorable of the drawing back in May 15 of 2003. And then between May and June of 2013, Drawing K underwent many variations in order to meet regulatory, playability, and safety requirements. July 16th, under at that time interim superintendent Dr. Miller, architect, and administration presented the status of the field improvement project. January 15th, probably one of the most notable dates on this timeline is simply that moment in time where it became a reality for the Methacton School District to be able to move forward with the concept of a field project, and certainly February 26th, just in recent memory, we approved the rebid of the project. With that said, I'm going to turn the microphone over to David Horn to start talking about the Plan K discussion. David?
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. And
Before you get into Plan K, Dave, we've been here since the beginning, and Dr. Zerbe unfortunately hasn't said. You have to realize Plan K was one of, you can tell me what, it's 15 drawings?
17.
K is the 11th drawing that so it was 17 total, and we picked K, and this has been going on a long time. So when you say we picked Plan K back in May or July or whatever that was of last year, this is something that the board has voted over. Maybe you can explain how we got to that.
Sure.
Just to give the history since you've been here.
Sure. Absolutely. We started the design process by inheriting some preliminary design recommendations by a previous consultant. And that goes back to November of 2011. And that benchmark of a recommendation, as I'll refer to it, when we first started the project on day one, included a budget of $3.5 million, and included for that budget, based on the previous consultant's assessment of what you needed, in a conceptual format, 2 new synthetic turf fields, 2 new track and field D areas. I think I described what a D area was, but if anyone needs a reminder of that, I'll certainly give it to them. And just 2 new D areas. No refurbishment to the running track oval for that 3.5. No extra runways beyond the 2 D areas. No shot put, javelin, things of that nature. A restroom building of some sort, but I could tell you it's not the equivalent of the current restroom in our base bid. It's something a little less in size for the $3.5 million. And that was pretty much it. Some new fencing at the stadium area, and I beg your pardon, some retaining wall work at the second synthetic turf site, which, by the way, was by the previous consultant a location just north of the tennis courts on that athletic field. I don't have a pointer with. Go ahead.
Just to make it clear that those plans were given, but we did not pay for them.
Understood.
Those were the consultant was asked by our superintendent at the time to do those as a demo.
Sure. Yeah, and that's how we, thank you. And that's how we took it in that context. But we had to use it as a benchmark, a starting point, because for whatever reason our contract was based on that. And that area of where that second auxiliary field is right here, and it had some retaining walls in this general area and some retaining walls here and things like that. So with that as a starting point, then in December 2011, Architera embarked on assessing your program, your budget, and it led us to a series of meetings with a small core group, initially of school administrators and athletic personnel, and 1 or 2 folks or 3 from the school board would attend some of our work sessions. And we started generating some plans that looked at not only that benchmark concept that was donated to the school district before we arrived, but some other ideas. And as we progressed, we received additional input at that time, early in the project, primarily from the athletic department, on some needs that they specifically had for us. And we began to incorporate those needs, and with every variation of a development plan, we also provided estimates of probable construction cost. As we moved from starting in December of 2011 through January of 2012, the superintendent of the school district at that time expanded the working sessions to include some township administrators, one or two residents of the school district, as well as the core group that had initially been established, which included school district administrators and a couple of school board members. And we worked together as a team in going through development scenarios and getting impressions from the various groups represented in these meetings. And that resulted in some design work, some review work, some design changes, some more review, to the point where over the next several months we expanded once again the group to include meetings once, twice, perhaps 3 times in the evening with interested neighbors in the school district who wanted to come in and meet and talk about our plans. And that went on for a couple of months as well. So you can see rather quickly how we went from an initial concept through a number of permutations of ideas on where fields would be. As I said, approximately 17 different ideas, with then Plan K, as it was known at the time, to become the one based on a number of variables, and that includes, I'll just mention a few, the size of, say, the terrace that was going to receive a synthetic turf field, the proximity to neighbors, the proximity to utilities, parking, other types of considerations such as solar orientation, depending on the sports that may be occupying a given space, the ability to be versatile enough to accommodate needs, the quality of the facility that would result, stormwater management impact. And over time, it seemed like this Plan K, and it picked up quite a bit of, I won't say baggage, but it picked up quite a bit of additional scope of items, such as campus-wide stormwater management, such as field lighting, that weren't represented in the initial $3.5 million budget or scope. And go ahead.
The majority of the additional scope is
The majority? You know, I'm going to say very truthfully that it came from a number of entities and factors, and I'll give you some examples. Some of it came from the township. For example, if you're going to put up lights, and if you're granted approval to put up lights, then lights, the typical lighting design for an athletic field nowadays is 4 poles, based on my experience, 4 poles and anywhere from 85 to 100 foot tall poles. The township has suggested that it would be 85-foot pole maximum and perhaps limited to 30-foot candles, where we routinely design 30 to 50. So if we end up through the conditional use hearings that were now ongoing with a 6-pole system or 5-pole system per field, as we're currently out to bid for in an alternate bid, then that's more costly than the traditional 4-pole solution. Similarly, from the township, there was direction about the need to clean up some of the stormwater on campus that, frankly, may not have been addressed over recent development history. So that's something that's that we have to do in order to do this project. And that was not foreseen at the beginning of the project. For example, some of this came from Architera, and I'll give you an example. You know, when I started this project, I never would have thought or guessed that we would be doing 2 new softball fields. But it just so happens the ideal solution, given all the factors, for the auxiliary field, because of its size, because of its proximity to a number of other amenities, because of its distance from adjacent residential buildings, and things of that nature, the best place for the auxiliary field on your campus happens to be where the 2 existing softball fields are. So by at least exploring that option, and as it turned out, it became a very popular or feasible option, now we have to build 2 more softball fields as part of this project, which we did not envision in the $3.5 million budget at the beginning of the job. So, and then finally, just to conclude your answer, some came from the school. I mean, the school district saw this as an opportunity to be a little clearer on what their needs and desires would be. And rather than the benchmark 2 new Ds, they would like to see a running track oval refurbished. They would like to see only 1 D, but they would like to see 2 shot puts, a javelin, 3 horizontal jump pole vault runways, and 2 discuses. That's more than initially the benchmark or the budget was accommodating. So you can see there were different forces at play here, and Plan K tries to synthesize all that thinking into the most feasible option. So with Plan K, and by the way, based on your direction last week, we are now out to bid as of Saturday, March 1. And we are scheduled to receive bids on March 18th, and we are scheduled as a group to discuss those on March 25th. Plan K shows the areas that are highlighted there as a base bid entity. And it represents, first of all, one synthetic turf field, not 2, 1 synthetic turf field in the stadium, 1 new track and field D, 3 runways relative to horizontal jumping and pole vaulting, 1 new restroom facility, 2 shot put areas, 1 javelin area, new stadium perimeter fencing, new campus-wide storm water management, and all that is shaded there in green. And of course the red color is the new track work. The 1 rectangle represents the new restroom building right there, and the new synthetic turf is there. And the electrical support and plumbing support for the restroom building, electrical needs on the floor of the existing stadium, and plumbing needs on the floor of the existing stadium. That is your base bid project scope of work. The next slide shows you what would be the summation of what we're calling in the bid documents bid alternates, and they are options. And it has to deal in the stadium area with adding a second restroom structure right there next to the other restroom structure. Let's see. Adding field lighting to the stadium field, and there's several scenarios of that depending on where we may be at the end of March with the conditional use hearing process. Adding some safety features such as some temporary ball control netting so that, for example, lacrosse could be occurring on the field of play in the spring, while some track and field running is occurring in a practice scenario, potentially at the same time or shortly thereafter, or slight overlap, and in a safe manner. Enhancing or reinforcing the sound system at the stadium if desired. And some minor modifications as to whether we upgrade the pole vault standards and sand pit areas of the horizontal jumps. At the auxiliary field, this is a package deal. Because we're displacing the two existing softball fields here and here, they would be reconstructed here and here, while an auxiliary synthetic turf field would be constructed. Now, that would be a very large field to accommodate all sports, including the largest size of the range for soccer if it were desired, but you could also play or practice across the field in 2 or 3 mini fields for drills if desired or needed. But all other sports could be accommodated on there from a practice point of view. Lacrosse, as I mentioned, both genders. Soccer, both genders. Field hockey. You could even have football practice on there. You certainly could have band practice on there. You could have baseball drills during inclement weather if you wanted to on there. And of course, you could have physical education classes not only on this area, but this area as well. This would be a JV softball field. This would be a varsity softball field. Some of the auxiliary field and softball field alternates deal with adding electric service without the lights to this complex, depending on, once again, where we are with the conditional use hearings at the time of bid opening and analysis. Adding field lighting without a lighting system. In other words, put in the components such as the wiring, the conduit, but hold off on the actual lighting equipment such as the poles or the lights, depending once again on where we are in conditional use or where we may be on budget when the bids come in. Adding sound to the facility at the auxiliary field, and then other minor things such as adding flagpoles or possibly eliminating modular dugouts, things like that.
Go to the next slide.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So moving forward, we have a set of recommended actions that the board should consider as part of their March 25th decision. And then there will be some additional decisions that you can make. So David is going to go through some of those items now.
You know, when we have 12 bid alternates under general contractor and another 12 different alternates under the electrical contract, it can get very confusing. And I think my goal tonight is to give you a strategy on how I would organize these alternates so that when bids come in, you could apply this playbook strategy in a step-by-step manner in which to review the numbers to the priorities you're going to hopefully come to some consensus on before the bids come in. So in other words, we want to try to organize in your minds tonight, if it's possible based on the presentation, on, okay, we know what the base bid is. What are the key alternates? How do we prioritize? I'm going to give you some suggestions on that, but they're only suggestions, folks. You need to make the decision. So, assuming the numbers all come in fairly and as expected, what would be some of the recommended courses of action? Well, I want you to be aware, we have 3 separate projects here. One is called, and they're based on the type of work the contractors do. General construction, which is everything but electric and plumbing. And then we have electric and we have plumbing. We received a bid on plumbing last month, and it was a fair and apparently responsible bid based on our assessment of it. We received a bid on the electric last month, but in reviewing those bids, while it was a very reputable company, one that I've worked with on several projects, I thought in reviewing some of their numbers that the school district could benefit from a rebid of the electric to get more competitive numbers. So we are rebidding the electric, and of course, as you know, we are rebidding the general construction. So when the bids come in, the first thing is you're going to get a base bid. That goes back to that first colored slide. And we would accept the base bid, and then we would try, if there was a decision to do that, to build upon the base bid. In other words, what are the components that we feel we want to add to this project? And based on that benchmark, free conceptual plan that we inherited from the previous consultant, we thought you would want to try to get to that second synthetic turf field as a priority. So our first course of action would be, in reviewing the options, would be to accept option GC2. GC stands for general construction. And that would add the auxiliary field and the softball field. Then we would suggest, for safety reasons, because it surfaced from the athletic department, that they would like to see ball control netting, it's portable, added to both the auxiliary field and the stadium field. So then I would recommend the acceptance of option GC7 and GC8, which then gives you that safety component on the new complex. And then under this scenario, if you wanted to have some sort of sound system at the auxiliary field, then I would accept option EC standing for electrical construction, option EC7, which provides a sound system at the auxiliary field without the lights. And the reason I distinguish that is because normally we would mount the speakers on the light poles. But at this point, as we're going through this progression, we haven't added lights to the project. So I would add the sound system with their own individual poles. And we have a strategy in place for that. Then as we move on, let's talk about the second priority, which, in my opinion, may be the lights. And depending upon the conditional use hearings, in 3 weeks, we have to assess where we're at. If, for example, we have been approved for the 85-foot tall maximum height for poles and a 30 and 50-foot candle field lighting level, then I would accept option EC2, which adds the stadium field lights in their total effort. Lights, electric, conduit, control, everything. I would also accept EC3, which adds the lighting at the auxiliary field. And then I would, since now we have light poles, I would go back and say, well, wait a minute. I don't want to accept that EC7 under this scenario. I'd rather accept EC11, which now puts our sound system at the auxiliary field onto the light poles that we just decided to add. Okay? And if, however, our conditional use hearings render us unapproved at this point in time, or inconclusive at this point in time, I should say, for an 85-foot tall maximum pole height and 30 and 50-foot cantle level on the fields, then we still have an option of moving forward. We could accept option EC9 and EC8. EC9 puts power, equipment, but not the light components to the stadium field. While they have part of the area under construction, they could put in the conduit, they could put in the wire, but they would not put in the poles or the lights because we're still perhaps waiting for some sort of resolution from the township. And we could do that on both fields by accepting alternates 9 and 8. Or let's say we have a conclusion and we were not successful through conditional use. Then we could accept EC4, which only puts power, or an EC6, which provides power to the auxiliary field for everything but the lights. In other words, the receptacles that are out there at softball, out there at the auxiliary field, and puts empty conduit for field lighting at both fields, but no wires for field lighting, and no poles and no lights, but just the empty conduit. So it limits our excavation in the future when we do move forward with lights. So you have 3 options there on how to handle lights at the end of the month. And prices, you'll be receiving prices from contractors on all 3. Yes?
So just to be clear, EC4 and EC6, those are either or. You're either going to accept EC4.
No, we want to accept. I want to. Did you come to resolve that in your own mind? Okay. Yeah, it is not an either or. Yeah. Okay. Now, there are some additional decisions that could be made, depending on the disposition of the board. For example, one has to deal with sound system reinforcement at the stadium. You currently have a sound system at the stadium. We do have a design. It's being bid through 2 different alternates, which is EC10 and EC5, to add an enhancement to the sound system at the stadium. EC10 is mounting the speakers on the visitor side of the field on the light poles, assuming there are light poles at that time. EC5 puts the speakers not on light poles if light poles aren't part of the equation, but rather on their own individual poles designed specifically just for the speakers, and at a considerably lower height than 85 or 80 or 75 feet. So there's that decision. The second decision is, how important is a second new restroom building to the school board and school district? If it's important and there's money in the budget to do it, and if the priority is such in your own ranking that the consensus is to do it, then you should accept GC1, EC1, and PC1. That's the general construction of the second restroom building, the electrical work for the second restroom building, and the plumbing work for the second restroom building. Other minor things that are part of the bid options are, there was a request for a new flagpole over in the vicinity of the auxiliary field and the new softball field. We have that in there as GC9 option, and you would simply approve that. Another was trading out the newly constructed landing pits with prefab landing pits. One of the 2 pits would have a cover with it, and if that's the case, you would accept option GC6. And let's say, depending on where the bids come in, we need to economize on some of our decisions. That's just another word for cutting costs. There's 4 options available to you. And these are all individual or in combination, but GC4 is frankly structural spray, the new track oval. I'm sorry, structural spray, the new track runways, not the oval. The oval's getting a squeegee, just a squeegee new refresher coat. But structural spray, the new track runways, instead of a sandwich system. It's about $10 to $13 a square yard less expensive in doing that. So there's some savings there. Option 2, the second line item there, which is a general GC option 5, would be now the running track oval, instead of putting that squeegee coat of new polyurethane surfacing on top of your existing track, to hold off on that, not do that, and simply repaint the lines and the numbers and the symbols on the track. There is savings there if you do that. Another one is eliminate end zone graphics on the synthetic turf field in the stadium. You may recall, I believe we were saying Methactin in big letters in the one end zone and Warriors in the other end zone. We could simply eliminate those graphics that are actually permanently colored carpet and just go with green end zones, knowing that you could always paint the end zone graphics, or you could always add them 1 year, 5 years, whenever down the road, if you had other resources to do that. And then the last one was eliminating the softball outfield fences and accompanying warning tracks through GC3 option. And what that does is it creates a grass outfield without fences or warning track in the outfield, and allows you to place another athletic field as an overlay in the outfield, much as the current softball complex is being used. But there is some safety concern there in eliminating the fences of balls from one area going into another field, or outfielders backing into one another, things of that nature.
And then the last part of this part of the presentation this evening is talk about some timelines. But when we end with the timelines, what I'd like to be able to do then is provide the board with the running items that Dave went over today, so we can go back to our seats, have some discussion about those items. We'll have those items in paper format in front of you, and then we can have some dialogue. But lastly, on this presentation, we're talking about just some general topics within the timeline. Conditional use hearing is scheduled for March 10th. The rebid responses are due on the 18th. At our 18th school board work session, planned to be held at Arcola, we hope to be able to come to you with a fundraising consultant for approval. We also will recommend at that time, and we'll give you an update on the owner's rep for an approval on the March 25th meeting. On March 25th, looking at the bid award and to finalize the entire process moving forward with this project. April 8th, another conditional use hearing. The 15th, the planned construction start date, and the 30th, the planned substantial construction end date. With that said, I'd like to ask the board to return to their seats. I'll hand out the paper reflecting this PowerPoint, and then we can have the president preside over having discussion. Do you need a copy of this? Do you need a copy of this? This will be what they'll be working off of. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like Mr. Phillips made a break for it, but I'm sure he'll have his questions saved up. So at this point, let's open it up to questions from the board for either Dr. Zerbe or for David. Anyone have any questions based on, go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, going back to the comment you made about the netting, and that, I think you used the word mobile?
Portable?
Portable, I'm sorry.
Sure.
So does that mean that it's on like wheels that would have to be wheeled out? Explain that for me, please.
Sure, and I suspect there's going to be a number of questions on details like that tonight. The portable ball-controlled netting is actually sleeved. That is to say, there is it's a system of aluminum poles with black nylon netting. On the stadium field, the pole foundation is concrete underneath the synthetic turf, and it has sufficient padding and whatnot on top of the concrete before you have the green carpet of the synthetic turf. It has a little sleeve cap. The sleeves are about 3-inch diameter, and whenever you want to put the portable ball control netting up, you would insert the poles are 20 foot high behind the end lines and 10 feet high up just a small portion of the sideline, up to about the 20-yard line, okay? And then in the middle of the field from the 20-yard line through the 50 to the next 20, it's open, there's no, okay. And it's geared towards shots on goal, particularly on lacrosse balls, sometimes on field hockey balls that may miss the net, may miss another player and go beyond, and rather enter the track and field area where it could strike a runner. It's routine that this type of ball control netting, we did the exact thing up at Upper Perkiomen School District. They install it at the beginning of the springtime. They take it down at Upper Perkiomen. They take it down at the end of track and field, sometime around near the beginning of June. And then they store it, and it's gone. And then they put it up whenever they feel there may be a conflict between uses and a safety issue.
Thank you. I guess what I was thinking when you talked about portable was, with all the plans and everything that goes with the new surfacing and the new pits, whatnot, is there going to be an increased need for storage of anything?
I would say yes.
Yeah, that's certainly been a topic of our conversation, especially with respects to the Athletic Advisory Committee. But we also recognized going into this that we were at a point, at least when I came on board, that I wanted to address those things that were related to safety first, and then deal with the issue. There are other things that we need to deal with, absolutely. But as we could plan those items out for the next 10 years and not get it redetailed down. And what I mean by that is, we have a solid plan in place to provide a safe, playable, and accessible campus-wide field project surfaces. We certainly will need to work towards, improving our storage. But we have that same concern today, even if for storage, even if we wouldn't make a change on the field. So, I'm sure our athletic director could comment on that if need be. But that's what I'm told, and that's been a problem here on this campus for some time, and it will primarily be a problem into the future until we address that.
The additional equipment that I think this project may bring that would require some storage would be the ball control netting system, which is just poles of net, and then the turf groomer piece of equipment that would groom the synthetic turf, which frankly is about the size of a lawnmower, riding lawnmower. So it's, you know, the number of goals and things like that is really not changing, as I understand it. Thank you.
Can we go, I'm not sure, Dr. Zerbe, if it's you or if it's David, to go through the, one more time, the results of the playability study, just so we understand, assuming we move forward with the Project K as presented, what that means from a playability standpoint?
Sure. Don't have it with me, but I think I have it memorized. The bottom line is, I mean, we tabulated all the events that occurred on every outdoor athletic venue on this campus. And what we found is that there's a shortage of fields. No surprise there. Every public high school I've ever worked with had that result. It's to the magnitude of the shortage or the deficiency. And if, I mean, I think everyone knows, I walked you through a number of meetings ago, but I'll do it again if you'd like, what I mean by an event, a 2-hour use of the field and things like that. If you need, if you seek more input on that, I can give it to you, but I'm trying to minimize your time tonight. So the bottom line was, when you consider, 55 to 60 events a year as being sustainable, and anything up beyond that on a grass field, not sustainable turf, and a lack of sustainability often contributes to a less safe field surface, because you're wearing away the grassy, leafy tissue that is somewhat of a softening of the playing surface, as opposed to the dirt that's there, or mud that's there. Less compaction with sustainable fields under 55 events. You have air in the root system. You have more water getting down into the root system. It sustains the turf. The more compact that turf or that surface is, that grass surface is, through the absence of grass, because it's been worn off through too much use, you can't maintain or sustain those fields in a safe manner. Injuries tend to result. So we found that, given all the math on actual usage and working with your athletic department, that you are in fact the equivalent of about 9.5 fields deficient in being able to accommodate just the current school needs and community needs on your campus. And I alluded to a few meetings ago that there's some national standards or rules of thumb, and that is a synthetic turf field with lights is the equivalent of minimally 3 natural grass fields. And if you don't light the synthetic turf field, it's the equivalent of minimally 2 natural grass fields. So one way that school districts throughout the country that don't have the money for the construction and maintenance of new natural grass fields is to construct new synthetic turf fields without buying more real estate. That way they're gaining more athletic fields, because you can use these fields more than 55 times a year. They're not worn out by use. They're worn out by ultraviolet rays. And if you have lights, you pick up a little bit longer period of time during any given day to be able to utilize those fields, get more events on those fields. Now, that scenario in play here at Methacton means if you were to do the two fields that are calling for synthetic turf, and if you were to do them with lights, your decreasing that deficiency in the number of fields minimally by a net of 4. So you're no longer 9.5, you're 5.5. And the 5.5 becomes a lot more palatable because by taking some events off the remaining grass fields and putting them on synthetic turf, you're able to lower the number of events on those other grass fields on your campus, thus bringing them a lot closer to within a sustainability possibility. And all fields should benefit by the addition of the turf fields. I'm not here. I don't sell turf fields. I'm looking out for. Hopefully, you believe I'm looking out for your best interest. And we design as many natural grass fields as synthetic turf fields. But the point is, if you're short fields, you can't go out and buy more land. You don't have money for that. It's costly to maintain, let alone build new grass fields. It's easier, and we've done cost analysis on this over a 16-year period. It's easier and more cost-effective to build a synthetic turf field and maintain a synthetic turf field, because the maintenance costs on a synthetic turf field are about $1,050 a year. The average natural grass field, I don't know exactly what it is at Methacton, but I will tell you, in doing 75 different school districts, the highest one we experienced was $44,000 over at CB West. And the lowest was at Kutztown High School, which was about $12,000 a field annually to maintain. So you can see over time, the maintenance on a natural grass field adds up.
I have a question regarding the softball fields.
Yes.
One of the bid alternates is eliminating the softball field fences and warning track. And by looking at the photo, it seems that if you install those things, which are permanent structures, those fences, correct?
They would be, yes.
You are wasting a good bit of field space.
Well, that's why we had the alternate.
Well, my question is then, I mean, looking at those fields, I guess there's a couple questions regarding. You could easily convert that into some sort of practice field for lacrosse or anything. I mean, really, if a team needs a place just to organize, I mean, that seems to me that would be a place where we could gain some field space, okay? My question is then, and maybe Mr. Spiewak, you may have to chime in on this one, how often is the JV and varsity softball teams playing at the exact same time?
Always.
Always? Okay. So given that frame of reference, how often do they, or what are the chances of them each hitting balls into each other's fields?
Would happen several, I would say a ball getting past the center fielder onto the field would happen at least several times per year.
So conceivably then those balls could hop those fences regardless if they were there or not?
Yes.
Okay.
I would say significantly less often over the fence than a ground ball or one hopper, two hopper through the fence.
Right. So
It
you
is
get
a 6-foot-high fence.
As a former softball coach on our fields, it isn't the distance of flight, it's the roll.
Right.
So they would not necessarily exceed the fences frequently, but they would frequently roll forever.
Okay.
So the fences would in fact stop the roll.
Stop the roll. Okay. That being my next point, is there some type of fencing material we can get that could be used as a temporary fence?
Yes.
And I would like to see numbers on that one at some point when the time comes.
Okay.
What I'm getting at is trying to make more use out of that field.
I
It seems to
understand.
me that by putting 2 permanent fences there, you're wasting a lot of real estate.
Well, the reason I generated that particular alternate was exactly because of the comments you generated on July 13th when we presented that night. And that got me to thinking about developing that as an alternate.
All right, and I'm just going to cut to the chase on a lot of this. A lot of this is all going to factor around money and what these bids come at. So as a point of reference, on some of the things that are on here, it will be helpful in going down, when we go down to review the bids that come in, to find out if there's a way to achieve the same goal by spending less money, i.e. using a portable fencing system or something along those lines. I want to make sure we are exhausting all possibilities. Even when you talk about the modular dugouts at the varsity softball team, okay? That was one of the things, to eliminate those. Well, is there something else we could do that's a lot less expensive? Or maybe have that as some type of thing that could be added on later, which definitely, in my eye, could be done. So, the last part, the question I had was regarding the lighting poles. The ordinance clearly states that we will probably have to put fighting, if we are approved for the lighting systems, that we will have to use 5 poles in the stadium field, I believe. And that would be 5 poles in the auxiliary field as well?
No, the auxiliary field is a 6-pole solution based on the guidance we were receiving from the township, and the stadium solution is a 5-pole solution.
So if that ordinance is amended at some point to change those poles, to reduce down, that would save the district a considerable amount of money.
If we were to, let's say we were allowed to put in a traditional 4-pole solution on each field, it would save some money, yes. Considerable money.
Okay.
That would, though, require 100 foot of height for the pole.
Right.
In other words, at
Yes, sir.
at the current 85 feet in the ordinance, that's not a legitimate solution.
That's right.
One of the parts I was just thinking about as we were doing that, talking about that and looking at that second auxiliary field, is the stormwater management. Stormwater management, in looking at earlier plans on this, revolved around having some type of basins or some type of piping underneath that second field.
Right.
So if we don't do that field, what are we doing about the stormwater management to achieve the same goal? Like if we don't tear up that field.
Right.
And we're burying some, what are they, 48-inch pipes?
No, not, back in, there was a period of time, a few months ago, where that was a solution, but as it went through both county and township review, the solution for stormwater management was moving us away from underneath the field storage and relying more on the strategy now in place.
On the basins.
Which is basins. I do want to tell you there is at least one pipe that also serves as storage under the field, but not a series of the 48-inch, nothing to that extent.
Okay. Because that's another part of it, that field will have to be disturbed one way or the other.
Minimally.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Well, I think one of the major issues that I face is the issue of money. And as I think about the whole process as to how we got here, I hear that $3.5 million was sort of the starting number, and that our major issue was safety and more use of fields. I was pleased to hear from Mr. Horn that there was a committee that was in place that included some members of the board. But one of the things that we've experienced over this time is 3 different superintendents from the time it began until Dr. Zerbe is here now. And he's been learning about the project for the last several months. So how we got to exactly what the design is and what the inputs were to that, and what the real need is as opposed to what the wants are, is something that is of concern to me. When we talked about the amount of money, and we did approve that bond tonight, I have been thinking all along, as we had with the issues of capital projects that we need to do, that there would be money for capital projects. So that's my concern, is that we're going to wind up with something that's going to cost more money than this district should be spending on some things. One of the things I was gratified to hear, I guess, was that we don't have to put Methacton in one end zone and Warriors in the other end zone, and maybe somebody else would like to pay for that. But it's the kind of thing that I think we should be considering all along. I think money is a major factor about the whole thing.
Other questions? Kim?
I guess I have just two, I don't know if they're comments or questions at this point, but two things that I would like to make sure that we learn more about as we go. Number one, I would like somebody to keep us well on track when it comes to Title IX issues as we go through this. I think as we talk about pluses and minuses and adding and subtracting, I know that there are some pretty rigid reporting requirements that the state has in place right now for us to probably demonstrate parity or equity in terms of our offerings. So I think it's critical that we understand, the ups and downs of the Title IX issue. The second thing is that we're going into this with safety in mind, and at some point, I think it's wise for us to take a look at the safety measures that must be in place with this field when it comes to grooming and cleaning and, MRSA and body fluids and things like that, how that's all going to play out, all in the interest of safety.
Absolutely. Hey, you bring up a point that I've been thinking about a lot, Title IX. Folks had mentioned just doing one field instead of the auxiliary field, and I've been concerned about how does that impact Title IX, because if you do one field, football really is no more important than field hockey or vice versa, so it's not exact. I'm not sure where we are on Title IX if we just do one field. That's why I think looking at two is best, but it's a point well taken on Title IX. Other questions or comments from board members?
Just one practical one following up on that. What will the stadium field be used for? What are the specific things? Is it a football field and that's it, and a track around the end, or will it be used for other things?
Yeah, it's changed a number of times, and I hope I get this right based on the current situation. I can tell you that it will be permanently lined with a gridiron for football. It will permanently be lined for field hockey, a different color. And I'm going to look at Paul to see if he recalls, were we permanently lining? I'll get to the dots in a second, but...
We were temporary boys lacrosse, temporary...
Dots.
Dots
Yeah.
to paint. So check marks so that we could paint boys lacrosse. And we were...
Soccer?
Soccer, we were check marks for soccer
Yeah.
as well.
So, okay, that's where I thought I was. Thank you. So permanent lines, field hockey, football. Then we put in 3x3 dots that are color-coded at all the, permanently into the carpet, that are kind of little guidelines for when you paint the field, so you don't have to lay out the tape. You can just kind of use the little tick marks, and it guides you, and it really facilitates in terms of maintenance time to paint than sports like soccer and the lacrosses and or the soccer delineations on there. The field is a little tight, but still within regulation for soccer. That's why we are advocating a larger auxiliary field to give you a full range for the soccer and lacrosses and the other sports too.
So it would be permanently lined for those sports.
The stadium field, yes.
Stadium field. Opportunity to add additional, and I would guess then from there, operationally, the administration and the athletic department could use it for other things, practice, band, things like that.
Sure.
So,
Phys ed.
Phys ed, right. So not just benefiting the football team or the soccer team, but really
every student.
Wide variety of students and groups and walks of life.
If you extend phys ed on it, and I wouldn't know why you wouldn't, I mean...
Can you cover every single student?
Then every student who passes through this school has an opportunity to utilize that surface.
Great. Did you have more? Okay. Other questions and comments?
If I can just make a comment. Just to get to the cost issue that Brenda brings up, to me, there's just a handful of first-order numbers here, whether it's one or two fields. Two fields, and these are numbers, I'm just going to use broad numbers for conversational purposes, that David had put together in January. The estimated cost of the base bid was about $2 million. Sorry. We can't talk to those?
Well, this is being recorded, and bids are out.
Yeah,
So we don't want to give a potential bidder a kind of sense or direction.
We don't want to assume.
Tip the scales.
Right.
We can talk about cost, but not necessarily associate the numbers.
Yeah, okay.
That would be my recommendation.
Sure, I understand. But we're going to have some discussion about, that is your biggest single decision-making without getting into specifics of the numbers, one field versus two.
That's
your
correct.
first order
As part of the
decision.
presentation this evening, I said there were 3 critical decisions.
Right.
The first one being the auxiliary field.
Right. And I'm trying to get a sense of where the board is with this. I'm willing to say where I am on that, but I'd really like to hear what other people have to say, just to get some sense of where people are. Is that something that's in
Why don't you
balance?
start? Go ahead.
Given the magnitude of the number, and given that this initially started with the issue of safety, I'm in favor of actually doing one field at this point in time, and having 2 as a potential fundraising goal, or maybe something that's phased at some other time. I'm not averse to doing it, I just not at this point in time. We get into some of the other finer points of lighting and bathrooms and that type of thing, and I would just say that I'm personally in favor of lighting it as well for more playability, more use of turf fields, and gaining some benefit on the grass side. So really, I'm in favor of one with several other additions, making a well-equipped field. So that's my initial thought.
Maybe just for clarification, when you say one field, are you saying you want the auxiliary field, or you want the stadium field, or?
I would leave that to the administration to really decide on which one. I mean, I'd like to see the stadium myself, but I'm not sure I have a strong opinion on that.
So I appreciate that. I'll just share my thoughts too, since we're sharing. I think based on the conversation and the comments that Kim and I both made around Title IX, I'm in favor of 2 fields. I think that's kind of the project that's been envisioned from the beginning. I think it makes sense to do everything at one time. It may be more expensive now, but I think there's potential for it to be even more expensive later if you do things, have to rip certain things up. So, where I would stand is I'd be in favor of 2 fields. I'd be in favor of lights, and I think we could, if we needed to, we could work around the second bathroom. So that's just kind of where to respond to yours, that's where I shake out.
I'd like to also echo a lot of those points too, and I share your concerns, Mark, with that one field option, which is the original, and haven't been on the board when this first was started. One of the original things was to get that stadium, to get the football stadium done with artificial turf, and get it done completely. Now it's then morphed into a larger project, but I think it's really going to come down to what the bids come in and what we decide to spend on the project. We have the bond financing done, but I think what we need to do is find out what those bids are going to be. Ideally, it'd be great to get those 2 fields in at the same time, only because it's going to cost a lot less in the long run. Plus, you're disturbing the ground once. When you have the second field going in and they left another date, you've got a whole other construction project to go, whether we finance that through donations or however it's done. As far as the lighting goes, well, I'm 100% for the lighting. The question is on how we go about getting that in, whether we get approval from the township. And that will really dictate the course of action on that when it comes time to start, when we break ground on what we do with the lighting. Whether you do light 1 field or 2 fields, that's all going to come down to money, pure and simple. So, I mean, there's lots of different ways to cut this cake. But I see where Mark's point of view is with this. And I see also the Title IX part of it too. But the big part about it that I'll bullet point is disturbing the ground once, and you have all the equipment here to do both fields at the same time. That's an ideal situation, but we won't know any of this until we get those bids in. So,
Joyce?
Yeah, I struggle, just like Herb and Mark do, with the cost of this project. And, looking at right now anyway, in excess of 4% tax increase, to go out and spend $5 million on a field. That's what I'm struggling with. Ideally, it would be best to put them both in at the same time because all the equipment is here, and I guess economies of scale and all of that. That's what you've been telling us from the beginning, and I believe that. But maybe, we mentioned the fundraising, maybe we could look at the fundraising in a different way. Maybe we can talk to our capital campaign folks and rather than set a goal for them of money, set a goal for them of a field. And they'll continue to do fundraising until the field is financed by them. And it's just a thought. That would make me feel better about the second field as far as the community is concerned and the school district. But it is, it's not an easy decision. It's a struggle because we do need the turf fields. The lights would be great. I think we need the lights. And I think we need this project.
Other comments or questions on the fields?
I have one more thing. As far as what Joyce put about the money, and Stu, I'm going to ask you just to confirm about this. When we started budgeting for the debt service, we were budgeting on a $9.5 million debt service payment every year. How long ago did we start doing budgeting for that? Did it start this budget year or last year, or when did we start that?
It started with the 13-14 budget, the current year.
So this current year?
Yep.
So we're already paying for this project even though we haven't even done it yet?
That is correct.
For all intents and purposes. Because with the anticipation of when, we did not know when we were going to borrow the money, so we had to start budgeting and paying for this in advance.
That is correct.
So really, in reality, that 4% budget that's on the proposed budget would have been that 4%, irregardless if we borrowed that money or not, because we've already budgeted for it.
That would be correct.
Okay. But I understand with the bond, if we never borrowed that money in the first place, then we would have adjusted the budget accordingly.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Other comments or questions around the field project, field presentation? Jim, go ahead.
Good evening. As time has proven, the lights started 20 or so years ago when the lights were originally thought of. They were $165,000 to put them in. Now we're probably, 6 times that. The point being, construction costs never go down year to year. They will go up. We're at a time that make the decision, get it done, and move forward. We've had many hurdles here. We had a township that wasn't very cooperative, that killed a lot of time. Prices increase. May spend a lot of money on legal fees, which weren't necessary. Correcting problems, stormwater management, which is increasing the cost. And a lot of these were planned to disrupt our project, to stop our project in the form of hurdles. And to move this down the road a little further, this makes more opportunity for the township and other people to take a whack at it, to stop our project, to stop a better life in Methacton for the residents, the community, the students. Everybody's concerned about numbers, and I've always been concerned. One of the documents that we've just seen in our board notes was there are 611 students that are involved in the athletic program. Our athletic program costs us about $750,000 a year. There's a resource there. We talk about Title IX being fair. It's costing us over $1,000 per student per year for athletics. There's a resource that we can tap into. We've talked about pay for play when it comes to athletic programs. That's something that is a resource to fund nice things at the district. And then there's also fundraising. And there's a motive to fundraise all day long, is if we want to control costs in the districts, we want to keep these opportunities for students, we need to constantly fundraise and offset costs. Our salary and benefits towards the athletics programs are probably about $550,000 a year. So these are expenses as we negotiate contracts, as we look at the overall district. That's where we have to manage costs, and we have to look at it. The sticks and the bricks is a one-time cost when you put it up. Yes, you pay over several years, but eventually that cost goes away. Salary and benefits, they're cumulative. They increase every year, and they never go away. So as we're evaluating what this project's going to cost, also look at the other costs that we have in the district that greatly affect life at Methacton. And I am in favor of both fields and also the lights. And I think we got to get it done, because if we don't, it may never happen. Thanks.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yeah, I guess I'll chime in. I am also in favor of both fields, and I want to start from the fact that we started this 3 years ago. Most of us were on the board, everybody minus Brenda. And the main reason we started this was because it became very obvious that we had safety issues and we needed to improve our facilities. I still continue to call this a facilities improvement project, a capital campaign, whatever, not just turf. This is to keep it safe. This is to improve our campus. This is something that we haven't done in many, many years. I am concerned about the cost, of course, but I guess I look at things differently, and I am hoping that what I hear later in this evening about the fundraising, we have many opportunities. If we do this fundraising the right way, we can bring money back in. We have been told there's no no prepayment penalty. We can put money back into it. There's the options. I don't like the idea of having a softball field without either fencing or the I can't think of it. The dugouts. But there are many alternatives. There are people that can build them. We can have, projects. We can have somebody donate the money and build them. The Warrior thing, I don't want to have a field that doesn't have Warriors printed on it in Methacton, but maybe there's some way that we can have somebody come in and pay for that. These are all options that we can put on the table. There are many people that are willing. When we had that meeting at Woodland, and all the parents came out, there are many parents in this community, not just parents, there are many people that are involved, and I think we need to let them be involved, let them come out and do things. We need to organize it, we need to do it right, and I do think that whatever we raise has to come back into paying off the debt, because we have said that we would do that, and I think that we really do need to follow through with that.
Paying off the debt or paying for specific items?
Or paying it down, yes, paying it down in some way.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. I think that's, I think it goes without saying everyone here is concerned about the cost. I think nobody here wants to just go write a check for $5.5 million or whatever the cost is. So I think that, when we have the bids back, then we can sit down and we can make informed decisions. But I think this was important and informative for us to get our thoughts out, for one, for the public to hear, and two, for the administration to be able to start planning through things. So I appreciate everyone sharing that. Other comments or questions? Jim, go ahead.
One last thing. Storage was brought up as far as the poles and the netting and so on. Being that, and I believe that's something that's set up beginning of the season and taken down. It's not something that's a daily.
Correct.
Okay. We have, an old bus fleet. And one of those long buses makes a great shed on wheels. And you don't get in, when you repurpose it, you don't have to have a permit for that shed. You can move the shed wherever you need it to be, and it doesn't take up much space, and we already have it. So instead of getting rid of one of our real beat-up buses, it might be a good thing just to repurpose it and fit it out that you can store the poles and netting very easily, and other things. probably best.
Thank you.
Partridge family?
There it goes. Other questions or comments on this item? Not the bus. We're going to get off the bus. Okay.
Literally.
Good, very good, thank you. All right, with that, we will then, so we saw the timeline. I think anyone have any questions on the timeline or the sequencing or what happens next? Okay, good. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to item 7.2, fundraising consultant, Dr. Zerbe.
Okay, just give me a minute till I walk up there. I'm not going to ask the board to move. I really only have 3 slides. I just want to share with you that information and give you an update on the fundraising consultant. So just give me a second. So essentially, as a process to seeking consultant services, I've identified, and I will certainly provide these in a document and post these online for not only the public, but for the board to have as a reference to my conversation here this evening. But I want you to know that we need to have consulting services for a number of reasons, and this is really the scope of that consulting firm's
Fundraising.
Yes, I'm sorry. For the fundraising consultant for the Methacton Field project. We defined several items. Key items are defining the campaign plan and giving goals. There have been some questions, comments made by board members and even some members of the public about how we defined our amount that we want to raise. And certainly, I've provided a range to the board and to the public. But certainly, we really need to clarify that and set a target that not only meets our intended outcomes, but is one that's attainable and allows us to be successful in the matter. We hope that the consultant, it's our intent to have the consultant guide us in that defining of the goals. And additionally, we want to design an organizational chart and establish the committees necessary to help us move the fundraising efforts forward. We need to create a detailed timeline with major events. We don't need every event in it, but the timeline we need to establish. Are we doing a 6-month window, and here are the events? Are we doing a year-long plan? Is it a multi-year plan? And here are the different types of opportunities for individuals to give to the project. We need assistance with organizing and training volunteers. Our idea is really looking at it in multi-stages where we have different aspects where we talked about some of our booster clubs maybe getting some training on their level in order to help communicate the message to their groups in order to raise the amount of money that's established by the overall plan, to maybe a group that's designed to look at the corporate giving community and how those volunteers will be structured and trained in order to make sure they deliver the proper message on that type of level and in all levels in between. We need to certainly also need assistance with prospect identification and planning and establishing a message and a plan for developing campaign literature and collateral material. So those are the things that are tangible, that when we go to an event, we have something that hanging up that shows the field and it shows possibly where a company might want to get their name to name the scoreboard or put their name on the field and all the various ways that through the plan we identify those areas where contributions can be made in order to make an impact towards our goal. We need assistance with establishing and tracking the campaign's progress. Although we typically have a mechanism within the school district structure for doing that, there may be better ways or more consistent ways in fundraising efforts to track that. So we would get assistance or recommendations from these firms in order for our business office to best align ourselves with a long-term plan for the giving. And lastly, and certainly not least, periodic plan implementation review. We need them to be able to interject at certain points along the path for us to for us to make sure that we stay on target and that we are meeting our goals. So I just want to bring the board and the public up to speed on where the process has been. We solicited proposals from 7 fundraising consultant firms. Of those 7, 5 responded. Of those 5, we shared all the responses with the fundraising leadership team and the board. We conducted 3 interviews as a result of our review of those 5 responses, and those were telephone interviews. And lastly, we are now conducting background research on the 2 finalists. What we would like to, and are proposing in order to move forward, we would like to conduct in-person interviews with making final selection on March 12th. So we are scheduling the 2 finalists for in-person interviews to bring their team. We have an agenda of items that we would like them to share with us, including what the language is in their typical contract for these types of services. And that contract will certainly, once the board approves a vendor, we can then get that contract forwarded to our solicitor for review. We also want to make a recommendation to the board as established in the PowerPoint earlier this evening on March 18th. That would be the typical work session. And lastly, we would hope that we can begin planning discussions as early as March 26th. That would be the day following the acceptance of the bids. Are there any questions at this point for me regarding the process and the current status of the fundraising consulting update? Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Okay, at this point, we'll move on to number 8, which is courtesy of the floor. Any public that wish to? Mr. Andrews?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I'm going to keep my comments to the item called the Fields Project. One of the board members this evening asked for how much use there would be on the football field versus the auxiliary field, and someone else said, well, if we're going to do one field, let's leave that up to the administration. But in any event, I think that the actual use of those 2 fields can be quantified. It can be put into numbers, and I think the board needs those numbers. You know, if the bids come in such that you say, well, we're going to do it all this year, but we don't have enough money to do it all this year. I think on the surface of it, it's a little bit confusing about accepting option XYZ and option XZZ, but I think, giving that some of your own time and attention and attention to the documents that you have will be useful, because March 25th is going to come around pretty fast. And the other thing is, some of you talk about putting in conduit, as if you're not going to get lights this year, but eventually you'll get them. Well, I'm not saying that's a field of dreams, and I think that to some extent the people in Worcester want you to have lights, but they want you to have lights within limits. There's also sound issues, and I continue to think, relative to this project, that trying to do the whole thing in 2014, considering only have one acceptable bid for the plumbing so far. I think that's a stretch, number one. And number two, I continue to think that putting in turf before you get lights approval is a big no-no. And, you know, you maybe as a backup, you need some estimates on what can be done to improve the existing grass. And I think there's you know, Mr. Horn said that he does an equal number of grass fields and turf fields. I think that's a powerful statement. We have a football stadium where we've had grass for 50 years, and you know, we have comments of deplorable maintenance. Well, over the 50 years, I don't think we've put in $20,000 a year for maintenance. You know, maybe a shot of $100,000 on maintenance, that would do wonders on the football field. So I think, you know, I don't think going whole hog is an intelligent use of limited resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? Candy? Candy?
Candy Agawal. I've been sitting in this room and in other schools for 3 years listening to this project. 3 years ago, when they started to get serious about lights, and Worcester sort of pushed back, Dr. Quinn came up with this great idea to have turf fields, and one of the arguments were our fields in deplorable shape. A number of years back, there was a meeting at Arcola where there was a presentation done by EI Associates on the conditions of the fields in the Methacton School District. And at that time, it would be $1 million to repair all the fields. And everybody had a problem with that. And one of the supervisors from Worcester spoke up against this because his residents couldn't afford it. At this point, $1 million looks really cheap to repair all the fields. Now, last Friday, Mr. Horn mentioned that one of the problems we have out here is rock. Well, we got rock from one end to the other. Now, and anybody that has ever researched this area knows that that's what we have. We also have problems with our cola fields with rock because they were never maintained after the addition was built. Now, we don't have a good record of maintaining our property, our fields. You have a nice ball field at Arcola that is now being used as a dog park, and it's not maintained in the summertime. The kids play in the weeds when they go up there. This is upsetting when the board is coming back to the public and saying, you have to float a $5.5 million bond. You're going to ask us to pay for it through a rise in taxes. 3 years ago, when this became known to the board, fundraising, when it got serious, should have been started then. When the big rally was held at Woodland in October 2011, fundraising should have been started then. You don't put the wagon behind the horse. This is serious. Yes, it started out a turf field. Well, lights. Lights right now looks like it's Worcester's fighting. Worcester's fighting on lights. They're fighting on sound. I've been going to the continuous use hearings. They don't want it to be noisy. They don't want the lights. The one that's going to get hurt is our band. Our band practices in a parking lot. Ideally, they should be on a field with lights so they can practice when they go out and compete. If the residents have their way, it's not going to happen because they're pulling the strings. But, you know, there's questions, the board's asking questions or looking to Dr. Zerby for guidance. The board should be deciding. They just died one or two. The track, my son ran track at Arcola back in 2007, and even then the track was coming apart.
Candy, can you start to wrap it up, please?
Yeah, I know, but, you know, we sit here, you do a discussion, you don't ask the public. You wait till courtesy to 4 and you cut us off. But this is serious. You know, I'm concerned about my finances when I see, you know what I see? Somebody waves a shiny object and you're all jumping at it. And then you look at me like I shouldn't be saying anything. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are for this project. There's a lot of people that think the project is great, but they don't want to spend that kind of money, and they won't donate because they're going to be paying their taxes. They won't have the money. That's what worries me. We don't have a big fountain of money in this, both townships. You know, Worcester's, but you're forgetting about Lower Providence. So you need to take the residents in consideration and really take your Mr. Andrews, and I have to say this, I agree with him, and I say that when I bite my lip, when he said, stormwater management, first you need, can somebody at some point explain
Andy,
to
you
me,
have to wrap it up.
what is the problem with the stormwater management? Exactly what is going on back there in the field? I mean, I've heard about it for 25 years, but nobody's never described what the issue is. But fix that, and then take your time and look at next year.
Thank you. Howard?
Jeez, say my name and address? Howard Jones, Lower Providence. Having been there at the beginning, you need 2 fields. That's what you need. You also have a potentially much bigger problem with Title IX than you think. You already have it. As soon as you did what you did to the baseball field, you've already introduced yourself to a problem, because now you have a much better much better baseball field. The softball fields haven't been touched, and by the way, you've obliterated the hockey field. So you're already in Title IX territory. You need 2 fields. You need to do it now. It isn't going to get cheaper, as pointed out before. So I think, and if you were going to do 1 field, you shouldn't do the football field. You should do the utility field, because that's the one that has the most use that you're going to get out of it. You're going to have a hockey field. You're going to have softball fields that are upgraded. You're going to have all the things that are going to satisfy you. You could play football on that football field for a while without doing anything to it. That's not what I would like to see, but you've got to think about it that way. Mr. Horn has put together options for you. You need to look at them. So think hard, but you need 2 fields. Giving yourself 1 football field redone with AstroTurf, I don't even see why you'd bother. Thank you.
Thanks, Howard. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Going once? Okay. Seeing no additional courtesy of the floor, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Kim, second. Jim, all those in favor? Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.